on a goodwill tour there, around the country, and then her father, ambassador to Mexico, asked that he come to Mexico to help with Mexican-North American relations. So he did. He got there about Christmas time, and the story that he tells, I love, is that he got a little confused. He didn't get lost much, but he was worried about getting lost. And one of the things that he would do to find his way as an airmail pilot in the U.S. was to fly low over a railroad station. And then he would read the name of the station, so he'd know the town. And then he'd write to the next town and find the name of the railroad station. And that way, he could see where he was on the road map, because that's what they had. They were flying with road maps. So he tried this in Mexico. And he flew low over a railroad station, and he saw the word that was on the station, and it said caballero. And so then he went to the next station, and he flew low to find his way, and it said caballeros. And it took him 2 or 3 stations to realize that those signs meant men's room. But he did make his way to Mexico City and met Ambassador Morrow, my grandfather. He had 3 other relationships in Europe and 7 children. My half-brothers and sisters, whom I never heard about until 2003, when one of the 3 women died, and her children, her daughter especially, who had promised not to say anything during her mother's lifetime, just burst out and said, "I can't do this anymore. I want myself." She had always thought she was not only illegitimate but somewhat shameful, and she didn't want her daughter to feel it that way. And this is Astrid, my sister Astrid. So she got her 2 brothers to have a press conference and talk about this and say, "This is who we are. You know, we're sorry if it hurt somebody, but this is who we are, and when we're not ashamed of it," and so forth. And of course, my brothers and I went, "Whoa!" You know, we thought they must be just crazy or lying, and they weren't. And we knew this for sure. One, because one of my nephews, just on his own, went to Europe to meet them. He was very interested, he went to meet them, and he did a DNA test. And there you go. But also, we found out that my father had left the trust fund, sums of money in 3 chunks for these families, and that there was no question in my mind, because that's what he would do. He would provide. So several things happened with that. One of my brothers went to Europe to meet the families and with the same nephew and his daughter, who was studying there, and I had another niece who was in Europe. Her father was French. There were a bunch of them. There were 3 or 4 people in his old car that my brother uses when he's in Europe. A friend of his has this kind of a ratty old car, but Scott doesn't care. And he also was, looking for dogs, because he lives in Brazil, and he works with endangered species, and there was something about dogs and jaguars. And I think it had to have, I can't even remember what he was doing. I never know what he's doing. Last time it was pigs. But this time he had to get a certain kind of dog to help round up the jaguars so that they could go up a tree, so the farmers could catch them and not shoot them. And anyway, he needed a dog, so he had this puppy. So there's Scott, my brother Scott, the puppy, his daughter, a niece and a nephew, you know, all in this horrible car. And we were very, very careful at that time, because we didn't know whether this was real or not. This was pre-DNA. We decided we'd meet the families. And Scott, who was a darling, a sweet man, said, I said, are you doing this to prove to yourself that it's true or not true? And he said, no, I want to meet the people my father loved. And I loved his saying that. I thought I loved his saying that. And he did that. He went in the car to the neighborhood outside Paris, and everything was very, very secret. We even had a legal opinion, a sort of a legal statement that that was prepared by my friend Carol's husband, who's our attorney. So this was going to be top secret Lindbergh family meeting, and then the muffler fell off the car. and so my brother was, driving through Paris with the car going like that. And all the French housewives came out of their doors, and the kids just loved it. All the children, my half-sister's children, and then they had a picnic, and the puppy got tangled in the legs of the table, and things just were what things are. Somehow, again, you can't live famous. You can't live in scandal. You can live in a human community. I then was corresponding with the mother of Astrid, my sister Astrid, who got this all started in Paris, and we went back and forth in email, and eventually she came to visit with her children, spent some time in Vermont and some time with my brother in West Virginia, and she has her older kids have come back. One of them was in Wisconsin this spring, doing a junior year abroad kind of a thing in Wisconsin, and then she went to New York City to visit with my niece and my grandnieces, and her name is Isabelle. And Amelia, my niece, has gone back to Paris with Isabelle, and it just kind of all moves together, because the kids, they're not interested in all that. You know, they're just not interested. And I realized I like that very much. And I myself went to Europe to meet everybody. It must have been summer of '04. Took a flight to Paris, and then train all over the place, to Germany, to France, to Switzerland, parts of France, to Switzerland, everywhere where there might be somebody in my family I had not yet met. And I noticed that even though I don't think we look alike, but every time I got to a train station, I knew right away who it was. And they, who are about 20 years younger than I am, most of them, were very considerate of their older sister. So I was maybe 58 or 9 at the time, and they're all, they're maybe, the youngest was probably 35 and up to 45 or so. And they would call each other. You could hear them. They'd say, well, now I'll put her on the train, wherever it was. Can you take her off in Lausanne? And I realized it was exactly what my sister and I used to say. I think I wrote this here, about our mother. She would say, well, I'll drive her north as far as New Haven, and you come down here. And I realized, no, I'm a little old lady. But they were darling. They were very careful. Some of them were angry with each other, because Astrid and her brothers were very open. And some of their own half siblings did not want this to happen. In fact, we got a letter from one family saying, our cousin Astrid wants to do such and such, and we really think it's terrible. I had no clue. I didn't know who they were or what they were talking about. And after the revelations, then some of them were angry, and I don't know how much reconciliation there has been. But I know that I was able to go from one group, one family to the other, and they did communicate that way, by trying to get me on and off the right train, because I tend to get lost wherever I go. But I always get found again. I spent time with the people themselves, and I know their anguish. And I also I know one of the mothers, and like her so much, and want her not to feel terrible. She was devastated that the news was out. She was ashamed. She's lovely. I spent time with her. I don't know what happened. All of this happened after the Second World War, and these were families who had lost everything. 3 women who had lost everything. 2 of them were sisters, and one of them was a friend. It was a group of young women. And people have to say different things. One of my mother's closest friends said, I asked her if she thought my mother knew, and she said, I think she knew. I don't think she knew what she knew. She knew something. And the other thing she said was that she thought it had to do with the child, his lost baby. I never in my whole life heard him talk about that child. I could spend the rest of my life furious and stamping around and babbling about polygamy, but I'm not going to do that, because there are people involved whom I love.